Okay, hello and welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I'm the actor.
My name is Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer.
Here we go, Josh. I was going to totally change up the opening just to mess with you, but I try to not do that because I know you love the certainty of our opening. But today I was like, hello and welcome. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to blow his mind. So I decided not to do it. So
Well, you still kind of got both of them. So you got the normal and then the crazy open. So I'll give it to you.
one day it's going to be so crazy that you're going to be like, yeah, I'm not doing this. I'm not the broadcast engineer tonight.
And I edit the podcast, so I can make it sound however I want. So.
Oh, people, he says it for what it is. There it is. I love truth.
Well, okay, so you're not the only person who texted me or called me or talked to me about how good A Star Is Born is. And so I was kind of going into it this weekend. Steph and I went to go see it a few days ago, and I was going into it being like, all right, it's going to be fine. It's not a big deal. I'm kind of hoping that I can nitpick things out of this and make it, an interesting and clashing discussion. But it's a really good movie, and it's worth all of the accolades that it's gotten from the people who I know and from the people whose opinions I respect. So, that's where I'm going to start. So, it's amazing that this is Bradley Cooper's first movie. Now, just from listening to some of the interviews that he's given and things that he's talked about in the production of this movie, he had 4 years to do it. So, obviously he was busy during that time acting and doing other things, but still it's it's amazing that he could focus, for 4 years on this one thing, and it kept him, it enraptured him during that whole time to make this journey happen and to make what he created, come out and to share it with all of us. And I think that it was worth it, all that time and all that energy. And I think, I'm sure it's not the first time we're going to say this, but I think he had something to say, and I think he said it.
Well, your exact text after you saw it was, dang it, ! Star Is Born is amazing. And yeah, and it's interesting that you started there because I love the fact that you admit to your cynicism to a degree.
Yep.
Where you are very influenced by outside stuff when going to a movie. Yeah. We've talked about this before. I am not as influenced. That's why I kind of have bad taste in stuff sometimes, because if I like it, I don't really care what other people are saying about it. I mean, I do care to a degree, but not really. It's not going to stop me from loving something because somebody else says it's no good, or it's the majority of it gets, 13% on Rotten Tomato. If I find enjoyment in it, I find enjoyment in it. You, on the other hand, are influenced by things. That's why you don't watch a lot of trailers and that kind of stuff. This movie, hands down, lives up to its hype, and that we cannot say about a lot of movies. And people have been talking about this movie and interview after interview, and it's been promoted like no other movie I've seen in a long time. It's been trailer after trailer after trailer since early August. And it's been coming for a while, but it really kicked into promotion. And then the song came out, at least the trailer with the song came out, and that started blowing people's minds. And so it's unusual for a movie, even with somebody like myself who doesn't necessarily consider himself influenced by other things. It can seep in, and it can lead to disappointment because your expectation is higher than you expected it to be. You weren't thinking, oh, well, all of that promotion, all these people talking, Bradley Cooper's so good looking, Lady Gaga can sing, and people start talking about it. You have no idea how much it's influenced you before you go and see a film. That, I think, is different with you also. You admit to that you go into a film, if you know stuff about it, it can influence how you watch a film. Most people don't know that that's what's happening to them. A lot of people don't know that what's happening to them when they're influenced. So the point to that is that we've been highly influenced by everything out there leading up to this movie. But this movie is just genuine in its approach to a storytelling process that is so believable and so organic, you cannot deny the power of this film. Somebody on Facebook, Facebook friend of mine, said they just came out of A Star Is Born and they are shook. They were not expecting to have such an experience. And this is weeks after it opened.
Mm-hmm.
So, because we're coming to talking to this later on in the process.
Yeah.
The movie's been out for a couple weeks now. So I'm super excited that you love the film. I'm super excited about the film being great. But what I'm even more excited about is name the last movie that the majority of people have gone to and just fallen in love. They forget about their life. They've been touched. It's got deep, dark emotions to it. It's got true story plot lines. It's got unique performances. What movie has tapped into the lexicon of our society in the last 5 years like this?
Yeah.
There isn't one.
Yeah, and I actually had a weird situation when we were like getting our tickets. The guy at the box office area, who was, you know, getting us our tickets, he was like, "So have you guys seen this before?" And because it was like the second weekend that it was out, like he was just kind of like, he just assumed that like we were coming back to see it again because other people had been doing that all weekend, coming back to see it again. So that kind of set an interesting precedent there, that's anecdotally what they're seeing at the theaters. And it was packed. The whole theater was packed, you know, whatever, 2 weekends after it came out. So,
and the excitement in his voice asking you that.
Yeah.
The excitement. Is this your second time? You know, he's even excited that a movie has touched us. And it's not happened in a long time. So there are so many things I'm going to praise about this movie. I have a borderline obsession with a couple of the songs. I do. I have from day one. The moment I heard Shallow, the first 3 bars of the song, I was like, wait, is that Bradley Cooper really singing? And you could tell it's him.
Mm-hmm.
Immediately you can tell. I mean, you know Lady Gaga can sing. I've seen her sing.
Sure.
So to actually hear him, and there's so many things that we need to talk about, but the music is a force of nature unlike anything I've seen in a film before. I've seen movies where fictitious songs have been made up, musicals with songs that are made up for movies, and this one is just organic and genuine. There's no other 2 words I can think of. They're just great, and it got into my soul, and I could not stop thinking about it. Every single time the trailer came on and that song would play, I would stop what I was doing and turn and be captivated by it. And I've seen the video now, the official video. I've heard the song by itself on Spotify, and every single time, and I've listened to it 3 or 4 times in a row because I was challenging myself, is the repetitiveness of knowing this song going to dampen the emotional core of it? And the answer is simply no, it doesn't. It crushes me. Every time I hear it, I have an emotional reaction to it every single time I hear it. So I'm warning everybody, this, if there's ever been a podcast where I might just break down and start sobbing, this might be it. Because in that movie, man, I'm telling you, something about what Bradley Cooper did, man, performance-wise and directorial-wise, it touched my soul deeply. And I'm grateful that I can feel those kind of things. It's a tad bit embarrassing to just well up. And I definitely did that like side hand thing where nobody could see me if I was crying, you know, in the movie theater. And then I would sniffle. Oh, I'm tearing up now. I was sniffling like I had a cold, like I wasn't really crying. Like I have anything to apologize for.
Yeah.
First of all, I'm an actor by hobby. So no, I don't. But there's something societally speaking that's a tad bit embarrassing when you cry in a movie.
Yep.
But by the end of this movie, I didn't care. I was like, whoa, I love you both.
You're not the only one, because like Steph cried multiple times throughout this movie, and she's not a crier at movies. She just isn't. And the fact that like I could see her reactions to the multiple scenes. I mean, and it wasn't even just like, you know, we'll talk about scenes at the end and we'll talk about all those things, but it was like middle of the movie, or even like, I mean, just the scene where he's pulling her on stage close to the beginning. It's so just over the top emotional. And I think for me, it's the fact that you're marrying music, which is inherently emotional, with these people who we've learned enough about to understand where they are each at in their lives and what they're each looking for their lives. and how they've kind of intersected. It's like they've kind of gone on their own journeys so far, and at this moment they're kind of placed together, and then they're able to feed off of each other for this particular moment. And it just so happens that they're entertaining, tens of thousands of people live at that exact moment. And the fact that knowing the and understanding the change in her life and the moment that she decides that she does want to go out on stage and what that's going to do, what that could possibly do for her life. That moment is amazing. It's amazing that the song that she, sang for him the night before was something that touched him so much that he decided to stay up all night and make an arrangement of it. And he was definitely going to perform it no matter what, whether she was there or not. That is awesome and amazing. And it shows a lot about him and how she affected him. But then also the fact that he's giving her, that he's giving her the ability to share her passion and her art with other people, and that she takes advantage of it. Oh, and by the way, during all of this, that's Lady Gaga. That's somebody who has no problem getting in front of hundreds of thousands, millions of people at the Super Bowl to perform. And she makes me believe that she has never done that before. That's amazing.
It's killing me, dude. This movie is killing me. Let me make a point about what you just brought up, though, and it's a simple point. I am one of those people who we've talked about before. We've talked about this before. I'm one of those people who all you have to do is explain it for me in this particular movie, what's going on. So if I have an answer or a question and you have an answer based on your movie world, I'm fine with that. Whether or not it can happen in real life, whether or not it's logical, whether or not it's scientific, whether or not it's right for the real world, it doesn't matter. But explain it in the movie world. And so the moment you realize he's going to play this song that he just heard the night before. Now, granted, he's a musician of a decades-long career, obviously, because he's in his 40s at this point. So he's probably been famous since he's about 20, give or take, because everybody knows who he is. Mm-hmm. And it's a genre of music that not all of the people that come in contact with him probably listen to on a regular basis, but they know who he is. Yeah. There's like Springsteen is a great example. Springsteen. Everybody knows who Bruce Springsteen is, but not everybody knows his music like his fans know. Anyway, the point is that he starts to play Shallow, and you're like, wait, all of a sudden, less than 24 hours later, he's able to play this song live at a concert. That's like, it's a suspension of disbelief. But what he does, and what is it, Eric Roth? What they do in the screenplay is they interject small little tidbits of stuff that make it make sense, because he says, yeah, I've arranged this and I've kind of done it in a kind of shabby kind of way. I don't know the exact line, but I think it'll work for right now.
Done a poor arrangement.
Yeah. Yes, it's a poor arrangement. That's exactly what he said. So it helps the suspension of disbelief that they could just walk out on stage the night before and perform the song. Do I believe somebody who has talent, who is a musician, who's made it as high in the game as Bradley Cooper character, Jack, what's his last name? I can't remember his last name. Jackson Maine, that's it. I just started thinking about his name and I didn't want to say it because it's going to grab me. But all it took, do I believe he could write a song and perform it the next night? Yes, absolutely. I believe that. But there's a moment in movie music where it just becomes not logical. It doesn't have that substance that a live performance does, because obviously it's not a live performance. And it also doesn't have that, it teeters on the edge of falling apart at any minute when people try new songs live. Even if they're recorded songs that they've never played live before, it can teeter on falling apart. And I've been lucky to see a lot of acts who do live songs for the first time, and you can tell it's really borderline going to get ready to fall apart. But my point to all of that is that they interject that one line about the arrangement, which makes your suspension of disbelief satisfied that this song could go off the way that it goes off. And the fact that he knows that once she takes that microphone, it doesn't really matter what the arrangement is, and it doesn't matter how it comes across. When she opens her mouth, that's it. And the look on Bradley Cooper's face is a prime example of why he is probably going to be my pick for Best Actor. It's early on in the game, but I've supported Bradley Cooper when it comes to our nomination picks for a long time, so I can't see myself not being behind him. I would have voted for him for Silver Linings Playbook. I would have voted for him for American Sniper. We're talking up against Daniel Day-Lewis in Lincoln for Silver Linings Playbook. So that said, that moment when he realizes she's going to take the mic and go, it's just like he's a little kid again, and he found his favorite piece of candy in the candy store, and it's the last piece, and it's my piece. And it's like, oh, I got that licorice piece of candy, and everybody hates licorice except for me, and I found it. It's mine. The look on his face is amazing, and it's soul-crushingly beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
Mm. Yeah. Well, I guess let's back up really quickly. Have you seen any of the other A Star Is Born movies?
All of them except for the original.
Oh, cool. I started watching the original last night. I did not get through it, but it's in Technicolor, which is kind of crazy. It was made in 1937, so that's kind of like early Technicolor. And it's I don't know. I saw definite like parallels and some kind of like, I don't know if you'd call them homages, but there's definitely a scene where he drops her off in his car and then she leaves, like right when they meet the first time. She leaves and he slides over from the driver's side to the passenger side and leans out the window, much like Bradley Cooper's character does. And then he also tells her, he says her name. He says like, "Hey." And then she turns around and she's like, "What?" And he's like, "No, I just wanted to see you again." So like that was kind of cool.
Well, there's an homage to all of the films in there.
Oh, cool.
The scene in the bathtub where she's putting the makeup on him. Mm-hmm. That's what Barbra Streisand does to Chris Christopherson in the 1976 version.
Oh, cool.
So there's like little tidbits all the way through that are, I would say they were more a celebration of how this story has continued on, but you're right, they are there. And I don't really know any of the Judy Garland ones that stand out. I know that when she wins the award, he does what he does, and they kind of topped it, because the one with Judy Garland and James Mason is devastating. That is horrifying, because she's winning the Oscar at that point in the Judy Garland version, and when he gets up on stage, it's devastating. I mean, first of all, it's the Oscars. Billions of people watch. Not that the Grammys aren't as important, but it's the Oscars. I mean, everybody watches the Oscars. So it's devastating. And I was wondering when Bradley Cooper, and we're jumping ahead, we'll go back, but I was wondering how Bradley Cooper was going to handle that scene, because how do you top what's already been done? And does he ever take it dude, it was devastating. I mean, it was horrifying. How do you come back from that in the YouTube generation? How do you come back for it? But anyway, let's go back to what you were saying. So you're right. There are little bits of A Star Is Born all the way from 1937 on the way up.
The next question would be like, what is it about this story that they, first of all, that in 1937 they decided that they needed to bring out, and it seems like it's a little bit of, at least from what I've watched so far, I'm about halfway through it, but it's fairly introspective. It's about Hollywood as opposed to about music, the music industry, but it's fairly introspective about about fame and about how people ascribe certain things to famous people, and also how the famous people are separate from their art, but then also how that is like an attractive thing for people from the middle of nowhere. I mean, the Lady Gaga character in the original one, she's played by Janet Gaynor, and the character's name is Esther Blodgett. And then the famous guy that she meets, his name is Norman Maine, not Jackson Maine. You still see that, but they're able to kind of go through and say, this is something that's attractive, but you get to see someone on the beginning of it and someone on the end of it, and you get to kind of have like a point of view, both points of view, and meeting in the middle and seeing how they can interact with people, and I can see how it would be interesting back then in the 30s because Hollywood was still fairly new. Like the Hollywood thing was still fairly new. We're talking a couple of decades of an established area where they make movies. So that seemed interesting. And then as far as the other ones are concerned, you know, the Judy Garland one was about 20 years later, and then about 20 years after that, you have the Barbra Streisand one. So it is interesting how this story kind of comes back over and over again. But was the one in the 70s like really, really popular? Or like, where was that in Barbra Streisand's?
Well, she won the Oscar with Paul Williams for Evergreen, which is a beautiful song. So she has 2 Oscars, Best Actress and Best Original Song. I seem to see a pattern here, just saying. I believe it was, people went and saw it. It was a popular movie, but it got tore apart by the critics. And as a matter of fact, what's interesting about this 2018 A Star is Born, first of all, is everything is interesting. Second of all, that people have gone back to watch the 1976 version and went, wow, this was pretty good. What were we thinking? Yeah, people went back and said it almost like made us understand what the 1976 version was all about. 76, that decade was the 70s was a strange time anyway. So it just is odd in its style, and you know, it's 70s bell bottoms and women wearing suits, which I thought was kind of cool, and you know, big Afro type hairstyles, which I thought was great. And a lot of people had problems with the music that Barbra Streisand was producing, or the music that her character was producing didn't seem to match up to, I don't know, they just didn't think it worked as well as this new version does. That said, she's not supposed to have the same type of music he has, because Chris Christopherson reminds me of like a Willie Nelson meets Lou Reed type character. He does that sing, speak, kind of guttural Tom Waits thing, where it doesn't have a fluidity. That's not a word. It doesn't
Fluidity.
What did I say? Fluidity. Chalk that up. It doesn't flow. And he's got a strange voice, so the music isn't as appealing to the general populace. Although everything that I've read from people who have written any reviews that are not professional critics, they all say, oh, I love that. My parents had that album, or my sister and I watched that movie and over again. I've listened to that album over and over again. And those songs, and they'll name songs that you can only know if you've seen the movie 1,000 times and or listened to the album 1,000 times. They'll name songs that are important to their upbringing when it came to listening to music. So yes, it was popular. Critically, it was not well received, but it garnished a lot of accolades, and I think it's pretty great in all of those categories. But like, once again, I am not the judge of things like that. I cannot figure out what people's tastes are. As a matter of fact, the song that got me from A Star is Born, the 1976 version, is called Woman in the Moon. It's the first song that she sings at one of his concerts, just like Shallow for Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper, except for Barbra Streisand is pulled on stage by herself, and Chris Christopherson just walks off, and she sings this song, and all of that stuff was recorded live, which was important to Barbra Streisand, so they could get that feel, and you could hear it in her voice. She has this one line in the song that just got stuck in my head, and I was like 10 years old at the time. It just got stuck in my head, and I think it's the song, now that I look back on it, that actually keyed me into lyrics being important to a song. Up to that point, I think I was just listening to the radio and just following along and singing repetitively. I didn't realize that songs had meaning per se. I'm not saying it's the moment. I'm saying that if I had to say what the moment was, it was probably when I saw that. And I went back and watched the trailer, and it's the song that they use in the trailer to promote when she becomes the star in the trailer. And they use that line from that song. And that's probably how it got stuck in my head, because I was too young to see the movie at the time. But I cannot get it out of my head. And when people say stuff about, oh, Barbra Streisand this, and she's overrated, and all this other stuff that people say because they're jaded, I say, have you heard this song? This song is pretty impressive, and that line is soul stirring. So check it out.
Mhm.
It might not be your thing. That's fine. Everything has its groove to dance to, somebody once said. And what that meant to me was that every song has its place in your soul if you allow yourself open to it. So the answer to the question is yes, popular, no, critically, but now people are looking back on it saying the 1976 version was pretty amazing.
Yeah, and
So there you go.
And it is interesting that we've got two Hollywood versions of this story, the 37 and the 54 version, and then the two music versions, the 1976 version and then this year's version. But the difference between the two music versions are that one in 76 was with a more like, I mean, the music industry was an established thing and you had to go through certain, jump through certain hoops to become, kind of like famous type of thing. Whereas now they really utilize the YouTube aspect of our culture and the overnight fame. I mean, it is literal overnight fame for people now. And they may not know how to deal with it or whatever. But in this case, she was, her overnight fame was able to be kind of like tempered by her relationship with the Jackson Maine character. But yeah, it's crazy that we're able to kind of like it's not, this wouldn't be if this actually was a real story, a true story, it wouldn't be the first time that somebody had become famous, overnight, literally. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of crazy how there's even another angle to go at this story at, which makes sense is, I mean, we complain about stories about Hollywood not wanting to make new stories or not wanting to, put money behind, new and original ideas. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that every idea that's done before can't be done in a different way and with a different lens. So it's still a valid, it's still a valid way of storytelling and of artistry. And I think, it worked for me. And I think it was probably good that I hadn't seen the other movies when I watched this movie, because I would have been being like, ooh, that's a reference to this movie, and that's a reference to this movie, and oh, they didn't do it the same this way, and I would have been more in my head than I was, and I was a lot more open to where it was going to take me, and it definitely takes you places, and it's really emotionally centered, and they spend enough time with each of the characters and developing their relationship with each other, and bringing in other characters like her manager, and figuring out how to utilize those characters well without giving them way too much screen time. But you kind of see once the manager gets introduced, the manager who is played by Rez Gavron, which the actor's name is Rafi Gavron. So you have these kind of characters who get dropped in. There's other characters like, Dave Chappelle, who is in there for like a couple scenes, but he does a great job. You don't think of him as a comedian. You think of him as just a good character actor in that, in that space. And, we can bring up Sam Elliott right now. He has 4 scenes? And that was like the big thing that you texted me. I didn't even know he was in the movie. Uh-oh. We're going down.
Yeah, we're sorry. There's so many things about him that are so beautiful in this movie that I can't stop thinking about what he did in just those 4 scenes.
Yeah.
And he is the definition of supporting character. Yeah. He is without a shadow of a doubt what it is about. And for people who haven't seen it, I'm going to talk about a scene, and it might not even be something that people notice. I don't know. I'm sure they do, and I hope that they do, but it crushed me when I saw it. There's something about Sam Elliott I've always liked. He's solid and reliable. He did a movie called Hero a couple of years ago where he played an aging actor who had been in one great Western, and he was remembered for that. And he falls in love with a younger girl, and I cannot think of the name of her, what her name is. She's from Orange is the New Black and that 70s show. Pompeii, is that her name? No,
Ellen
not
Pompeo?
Oh shoot,
that's not her.
No, that's Grey's Anatomy.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll look it up.
I'll look it up. You keep going.
So he's always been solid, and I've always been interested in him as an actor. But to actually see him delve into such strong emotional character development is something I'm not surprised he's able to do, but there's something different about him in this. You read so much in what he does and just a little bit that he does. And the scene that I'm talking about is when he says, "You took my voice." And it's going to kill me. And Bradley Cooper said, "It's because you had nothing to say."
Yeah.
The look on Sam Elliott's face is devastating. It's devastating because you know, one, it's true. Two, I think he thought nobody noticed. And three, he knows that his brother does have something to say, that his voice is his voice. He did steal his voice, literally and figuratively, because Bradley Cooper does sound like Sam Elliott.
He does.
Yeah, it's brilliant, and it's well done, and it's consistent. And I don't care what anybody says; they need to get off his back about that, because some people have been a little critical about, his gruff. Oh yeah.
I think it's good.
People just. I do too, and you're kind of.
I'm very sensitive.
Really
to that.
hard on people with.
I'm very sensitive.
Yeah,
to that.
and I think it's believable. And what's even more astonishing is that when Sam Elliott starts to talk, you go, "Oh, this is a family thing." Like your father talked just like that too. You know it.
Yeah.
You know it. You're thinking, "Oh, it's just this aging singer who's been drinking," but it's a family trait. And so that scene where Sam Elliott says, "You took my voice," and his response to that, meaning Sam Elliott's response to what Bradley Cooper says, is what I consider great acting. That moment is etched into my soul forever. And literally, I don't know what happened after that moment for like 10 minutes. I literally don't know what happened in the movie because I was so emotionally devastated by Sam Elliott's, and it's just a look. It's one look. And it's probably going to be the scene they'll show when he's nominated, and he should be nominated. So I could continue on about that one moment, but the last thing I'll say about it is that for me, as an actor who has a hobby of wanting to create as an actor, to actually have one genuine moment on stage or one genuine moment on film, I could live a lifetime in that. And I have been really blessed and really lucky and fortunate to have had those moments on stage. Whether or not I thought I was good in the play is irregardless of the conversation. It's about making something utterly believable and emotionally grounded to the point where it shakes you, to the point where you don't even know you're there. We've talked about this years ago, the dead zone, where you just lose yourself, and it can be in a 60-second moment, and he has that moment in this film. So that's why I texted you, Sam Elliott, because he does what he got paid to do. You do not forget he's in that movie ever, and he's in 4 scenes, and that last scene when he's driving away, dude, it's beautiful. So I feel fortunate to have an emotional center myself where I can feel those kind of things, and I feel fortunate that it actually happened with an actor I respect.
Well, and we can always go back to what Guillermo del Toro said in an interview that I heard, where he said that, movies allow him to, fill the gallery of his soul with those images, and that's why he makes movies, and that's why he loves movies. And I think that's why we love movies, is that we're able to take those scenes and you're going to remember that forever, So it's that kind of permanence that is, it's amazing that especially, I think it would be easier in live performance in plays, but for a film, it is something that is so separated. I mean, he's playing that character, but he's playing that to, a few actors and a bunch of people on a crew, just on a Wednesday. But somehow that reached through.
Yeah, with a big black box right in front of you that is going to be HD eventually. How do you, it sucks your soul dry, that camera does. It just pulls you in. And the idea that it's right there is hard to get out of your mind. Yeah. You really have to be focused, and you really have to know what you're doing in order to pull it off. So you're right. It's absolutely difficult.
Yeah.
And to actually come up with such a genuine moment, and he has 4 scenes, and there's a genuine moment of absolute Oscar-worthy performance in every single scene. I am over the moon about Sam Elliott in this movie.
Yeah. It's amazing. Yeah. Laura Prepon was the actress's name who was in the movie
That's her. Yes, thank you.
The Hero. So, yeah. That sounds interesting. It's got a lot of people. I mean, it's got a lot of comedians in it. Ali Wong, Cameron Esposito, Nick
Zach
Offerman.
Galifianakis. Or no, Nick Offerman.
Yeah,
That's who I
Kristen
think it is.
Ritter. Catherine Ross is in it from like The Graduate and Butch Cassidy. I mean, dang. So that's cool. I haven't.
Donnie Darko.
Yeah, Donnie Darko. There you go.
Yes, it's definitely worth watching because, one, he's the lead in it, and we're used to him being a supporting character, so him to actually have a lead character, and it's an interesting idea. It's been done before, but it's definitely interesting in those people's hands.
Yeah. I'm gonna bring up a couple people here, just kind of behind the scenes, and I don't know if it's because Bradley Cooper has like worked with these people, you know, being an actor on some of their films, or what, or he just that he has a good relationship with these people. But I mean, his director of photography, his cinematographer, is Matthew Libatique or Maddie Libatique, and I mean we've talked about him multiple times. Most recently, Mother. He was the DP on Mother. He did Straight Outta Compton. He did Black Swan. So like pretty much Aronofsky. He's done a lot of the Aronofsky films. Inside Man, The Fountain. So that's another Aronofsky. So I mean he's been around, and I think that might have been a recommendation from Jennifer Lawrence, because she did Mother with him and Darren Aronofsky. So and obviously Bradley Cooper and Jennifer Lawrence have a good relationship from their film together, Silver Linings Playbook. So he was
and 3 others.
I guess so, yeah. But most famously on
American Hustle, Joy, and Serena.
Most famously on this podcast, Silver Linings Playbook.
Hey man, I own it. I love that movie.
So what about Andrew Dice Clay? He really impressed me. I was not expecting anything from him, but he played it straight, and he did like what he needed to do, and he did not stick out. And I think that's the key.
Well, he was in Blue Jasmine, so he's been acting, and he's been in some serious projects, and he is one of those people who, it's like anything. You cannot have an assumption about somebody and go through life thinking he is who he is. And yes, he's presented himself, hickory dickory dock, all that stuff that he used to do. Along Came a Spider. That whole bit is actually kind of funny. So he presented himself in a certain way, but it's like Dennis Leary. They present themselves in a different way, but given the chance, they are true actors. And I think what Andrew Dice Clay does in this film is, you're right, he doesn't stick out. And there were, if I'm not mistaken, quite a few people who would have made much more sense in our mind's eye as a cast list before you saw the movie. I think Alec Baldwin was up there, or Robert De Niro. There were famous people up there who were going to play the father, but Bradley Cooper is friends with Andrew Dice Clay. I don't know how that connection works, but he knew that these certain people were right for these roles, and he's 100% correct, because that scene where Andrew Dice Clay is explaining to his friend that sometimes you just don't make it even though you're supposed to, and Lady Gaga is overhearing that, and she hears the disappointment in her father's voice that not only did he not make it because he's living a dream of possibly have been a star when he was younger just by having some kind of interaction with Frank Sinatra, which has become a story of legend in their life to the point where she can repeat it, and she's kind of being...
Paul Anka said.
Oh, is it Paul Anka?
Yeah.
But doesn't he say something about Frank Sinatra
no,
later
Paul
on?
Anka said
Even
that
crazy.
He could have been could have been
that's
as
right.
good as Frank or something like that. That was the whole legend.
That's hilarious.
Yeah,
that is just the best thing ever. It's the best writing ever because it's not like somebody who instantaneously people would know who it was. It's not like Frank Sinatra said. Paul Anka, if you say Paul Anka to most people, they're not going to know who he is. Frank Sinatra, I would believe that the majority of people on some level might have heard his name at one point. So that joke is just infinitely great. But to actually hear his disappointment, but trying to do that fatherly thing where he's trying to rationalize that it just doesn't always work out for people, even if they have really a lot of talent. And there's this connotation of, he doesn't say it, but I'm sure there's an indication that, she is not your mainstream looking person. So maybe that's why she hasn't made it. And that's a theme throughout the movie. And she brings that up herself, that she doesn't fit in because she doesn't look like what the music industry wants from a musician. And so to actually play that, Andrew Dice Clay, you're absolutely right. He just is believable, and he doesn't overplay anything, and he doesn't do anything to New York, and he doesn't do anything like that. He seems like a human being who could walk off that screen, and he's that person who's on the corner of 42nd Street, and you're trying to figure out where to go, and he's like, yeah, go down there to that store and turn to the right. And oh, thanks, man. He's super nice, but he's very New York. Yeah. And sometimes those people are so over the top that when you put them on film, it's not believable because nobody really talks like that, but they do. So to actually underplay that and to actually be a believable person is very hard to do. So yeah, it's one of those things where I don't think most people know that that's Andrew Dice Clay. And if they do, they're not ready for what he gives us, because there are a few scenes. And here's why his performance is so important and needed to be grounded in reality, because of the scene closer to the end when, spoiler, when, not if you know the story, it's not a spoiler, but it's a spoiler if you haven't seen this movie yet. When he's in rehab and Bradley Cooper says, and your father, oh, your father. And he's so embarrassed about embarrassing her father. And she's like, I'm good. I'm not embarrassed. He's good. We're good. If you had not attached yourself as an audience member to Andrew Dice Clay's character, that would not have resonated so strongly, because you believe that Andrew Dice Clay is actually a good guy trying to make a living, trying to support his daughter, and he basically wants Bradley Cooper in their life because he's famous and all that other stuff, but he does have that kind of like cautious, hey, that's my kid type attitude towards him, and be cool, dude, that's my daughter. So it wouldn't have resonated as much at the end if Andrew Dice Clay wasn't hunkered down into absolute believability. So yeah, I'm glad you brought him up.
Yeah, and we haven't talked about, like, we kind of skipped over the beginning of the movie and her kind of like before she's like, as she's being discovered by Bradley Cooper's character. He goes to a bar called Blue Blue, and he has his driver Greg Grunberg from Alias. So they were both on Alias.
Love that guy.
Yeah, and so he has his driver, Greg Grunberg. It drops him off there, and he's like, "Oh, this place looks like it's got some drinks, and it looks like a bar." And he goes in there, and he realizes it's a drag bar, or at least it's drag night, I guess, at the bar. So that was interesting. And her friend, played by Anthony Ramos. Ramon is his character's name. It kind of like shepherds him in and shows him. And Anthony Ramos, he's been in a bunch of. I haven't seen the movie, but the Monsters and Men. He's in that movie that's out right now too, about the kind of like police brutality, or there's like some sort of a police are beating somebody and he takes video of it, and he has to deal with all of that, whether to go to the press or not go to the press or whatever. So he's in that. He also just got cast in the movie version of In the Heights, Lin-Manuel Miranda's first play.
Yeah, I saw that.
And he was in Hamilton. So I thought he did a great job. But seeing that whole interaction and her performance of La Vie en Rose was amazing, which I guess she's done that before. Like Lady Gaga has done that before.
Well, that's how Bradley Cooper got the idea of, well, actually, he saw her at a benefit sing that song as Lady Gaga. And he thought to himself, if I could capture whatever that is and put it on screen for my version of A Star is Born, everything will be okay.
Yeah.
And that one thing led to another. But he had to fight to get her in the movie. They didn't want her. Producers, the studio, they didn't want her. And he was like, okay, well, here's the deal. I do, and that's it. And you're going to be wrong about this, and my movie, so I'm just going to be charming, sophisticated Bradley Cooper, and I'm going to get my way because I'm right. And so, yes, she performed La Vie en Rose at a charity event that Bradley Cooper was there, and that kind of was the goal, was to get whatever that was, whatever she brought to whatever she brought to that song, that intangible thing. He said if he could capture that on screen, then he'd be okay, that this movie would work. And that's how it all came. And that's why the scene's in the movie.
Yeah.
Because he uses things that made him or influenced him as an artist actually in the film. Because, like, that's his dog in the movie.
Yes.
His real dog
That's
is
right.
in
Charlie
the movie.
is his dog.
I love that.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
Now,
I love that
so
dog.
wasn't she, before she was Lady Gaga, wasn't she kind of like a burlesque performer or like a performance artist type person? I thought that I read that in an article a long time ago where like she was known in and around New York City before she became Lady Gaga. So I thought that was an interesting kind of parallel, that she probably did shows very similar to that, where she was doing either burlesque type performances or, you know, kind of going out in the crowd and, you know, interacting with the crowd and those types of things. And her, like, you know, moving around through the crowd and interacting and actually being able to perform that song live, you know, live to tape, whatever you want to call it, you know, was amazing to me. And especially once she like got up on the bar and kind of moved towards him, there's a specific shot, and I'm sure you at the very least subconsciously saw it, but she's like in the middle of that phrase. And then he changes lenses. That's what he does. He changes lenses to this, I think it's a longer lens, and it is shot in such a way that it is an isolating thing where there's a whole huge group of people, this huge club that's full of people that are enjoying this performance. But that one shot where she's looking at him straight in the eyes, she's looking right down the barrel of the camera too, where it's them together by themselves, and that's it. There's no one else. And he does that using the cinematical tools that he has. Just a choice of a lens is something that's able to translate that emotion to the audience. And that to me is amazing, that someone can do that, can use technology to affect a feeling in the people that are experiencing their art. That is awesome. I mean, that's like the perfect like marriage of technology and emotion to me. So, and he does it 3 times in the movie, and seeing it the first time, I was immediately affected. And then the other 2 times he does it, you know, you see it and you're able to, I think it must have been one of these things. I don't know. I've not read any articles or anything about these particular shots, but it must have been one of those things where they only used those lenses at those particular moments for those purposes and never again in the film. And that to me is really awesome. It's a great way to utilize the technology to create that emotion. So that scene was awesome. That was so cool.
Well, not only that, but when we first talked about A Star is Born being remade, so we talked about the trailer when it came out, and we talked about this being made, and you were like, well, you haven't brought up this movie A Star is Born. And I was like, you know, I don't want to be skeptical and I don't want to be cynical, but I'm going to wait for this because it's a tall order that you're asking me here. You know, first-time director, in love with Bradley Cooper as an actor, not a problem. Lady Gaga was in American Horror Story Hotel, and I thought she was great, but there was something that I knew she had there was something else that needed to come from her as an actress for me to buy into her. She was great in Hotel, but this proves to me that she can do stuff other than be a Lady Gaga-esque type character. And she sort of is that in American Horror Story. As a matter of fact, I think I talked about this, where when she does flashback scenes in American Horror Story Hotel, before she becomes this major character, and she's a young lady back in, actually, I think like 1920s Hollywood, when she plays that character, it reminds me a lot of the character from A Star Is Born, because it's very vulnerable and it's very girl-like, young woman-like, and that is something I hadn't seen from Lady Gaga. So the point to all this is that we talked about the trailer, and you were like, and Lady Gaga with these strange eyebrows, and she doesn't have her own eyebrows. Well, we didn't know at the time that she was doing Edith Piaf, who is famous for those eyebrows. And so the point to all this is the amazing way Bradley Cooper utilizes that as the introduction to the audience, but also utilizes those eyebrows not as a homage to Edith Piaf, because she had eyebrows like that, but it was a way into two different scenes, a way into the asking her to have a drink scene, and she's like, yeah, I can't do that because I got to take these off and blah 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 blah, and then he peels them off, and there's this whole thing where he's kind of encroaching on her personal zone here by touching her, and then later on he actually asks to touch her nose, which is unusual, but it becomes a thing. It becomes a character pattern, not just something to do. And then later on, when she tries to apply the eyebrows to him, when she's making him up in the bathtub scene, which is an homage to the 1976. But all of that is said because, yes, you're right, that shot when she turns to him on the bar is not the shot. I think most people think that's the moment when they fall in love with each other. I think that's the moment when he falls in love with what she is, not what he sees her to be. And again, important for her to not look like who she is, because he falls in love with her based on what she just did in front of him. And then that shot of him as she gets up from the bar and starts to walk away is devastating. It's a moment of pure, genuine emotion, because you can see it on his face that he's not sure what to do at that moment. Like, what was that he's thinking to himself? I've seen a lot of things in my time as being this uber famous rock star, but what was that? That was nothing. And it's so subtle and so believable that it just catches me. And it's in every video for this movie, so you get to watch it over and over again. So I feel really fortunate to get to watch it over and over again. But you're right, there is something about the way that he focuses on her in that scene that just tells us so much without having to say a word about it. And you're right, her performance of La Vie en Rose, and I've heard it 1,000 different ways. As a matter of fact, I did a play way back in the day about Edith Piaf, and so I know her music semi-well, or at least as well as I could for having to be exposed to it for the short period of time that I was. And it's a very distinctive sound that Edith Piaf has, and you have to be on your game in order to sing those songs because they're hard. They're not easy songs. So you're absolutely right. I'm glad you brought that up because it is just well done. And it's an important scene because it's the first time that she accidentally sees him there. She doesn't go over to the bar because he's there. She goes onto the bar because that's the performance. And she just happens to turn for her performance and lock eyes with him. It's mesmerizing. It is movie magic.
Well, and another thing that I noticed was that during that scene, and at that moment when she realizes, you see her like in her element, performing for all these people, and she doesn't completely like break her performance to say like, or to, she doesn't like realize that, ooh, that's Jackson Maine. Maybe I can talk to him afterwards and I can start up my career by talking to him. And, I'm amazed that he's here and I'm starstruck and all that stuff. None of that happens because she's in her performance element. She's in that zone, that you talk about possibly where she's at the point, this is the best part of her day. Being able to do what she's doing, and it's not, taking out the trash at the hotel or wherever she works. So yeah, that I thought was another purposeful choice, hopefully, but another interesting, way to play that scene where she's not, completely starstruck. And even when he starts to interact with her, she's a little bit standoffish because I'm sure she's nervous and doesn't know what his, what he wants or what he's doing there. And she's just kind of, a little crazy, and she immediately becomes defensive of him. especially once they go to the cop bar and, he gives her, he buys her a drink, and then those guys come up to him and start, messing with him. And she does not she does not understand how he can even deal with that. And she becomes very defensive of him, not even necessarily because she loves him or anything like that, but just because she knows, she feels like that's not how people should interact with each other. It's not how other people interact with him is all transactional. It's like, hey, you're a famous person, do this for me. You owe this to me.
Yeah.
And she's immediately defensive of that, and that's why she punches the guy in the face and all that stuff. So
the best.
Yeah. Well, and it's multiple things where, even when they go to buy the peas and the lady takes a picture and the lady's...
Yeah, let's just stop for just a split second. So we're at the point where we are now going to speak about Lady Gaga in this movie. And it's interesting to me that you immediately went to the three things that stuck. There's actually four things amongst everything else that she does in this movie that stuck out to me. And it's that reality-based organic performance that she gets. You're right. I did not know she could play innocence so well. And when he tries to pull her on stage and she's like, "That's not funny, Jack. It's not funny." I believe her. I believe she's never been on stage before.
Yep.
How is that possible? And speaking with which, Anthony Ramos, who you mentioned just a little while ago, he is in that trailer and he's clapping for her behind her. And you don't know who he is in the trailer, but you know that he's important to her because he's clapping for her in a way like, yes, go on stage. That to me is an ode to Bradley Cooper, that he allowed his actors to actually have character moments who were not the focus of the scene. And he is not the focus of that scene. But when she decides to go on stage and he does that little yay clap behind her, it is so character driven. It's amazing to me. So back to Lady Gaga. I wanted to interrupt you because the thing that blew me away about her was everything, first of all. Second of all, it was the small moments that only a genuine human being who was trying to walk through this world and be kind and courteous and be a real human being and be a good person would get away with. And you're right. That scene in the bar where she punches the cop is mesmerizing, but it's a bit over the top. And it's to show you how tough Lady Gaga can be. Allie can be her character's name. But that next moment in the store is when I went, I'm in. Whatever happens from this, she could go blah, 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 blah the rest of the movie, and I would still think she deserved an Oscar nomination because of that moment when she turns to her and says, he goes, it's okay, it's okay. And she goes, it's not. It's really not okay for you to just take a picture of somebody without asking for permission. It's not okay. She has no reason. Allie has no reason to defend this big rock and roll star. He's been through it for 20 years, give or take. Why would she defend him? Not because he's famous, but because he's a human being, and no human being should have... It's actually a comment on our society now, without being too much of a comment. And then the scene where Bradley Cooper shows up at her house, and now it's been a little while since I've seen the movie, so the sequence might be a little bit out of sequence for what happened in the movie, but there's a moment he shows up and she tells him, I'm not going to get on that bike when you're drunk. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm not sure if that's the exact same moment, but when he comes to her bedroom and she's like, what are you doing here? Like, why are you in my room? Like, first of all, ooh, creepy dude, get out. Second of all, what? Get out. And he goes to the door and he's like, hey, I want you to come with me. I want blah, blah, blah. And she's like, okay, fine. Now go downstairs. And she commands and demands him to just do what she wants him to do. I believe that that's the moment he falls in love with her, because no one speaks to Jackson Maine like that anymore. They just don't. And the sincerity and the believability in those scenes are what etched out this character for me that Lady Gaga presented. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I was just so excited that you were talking about those moments. It's not the big epic songs, which are great. Yeah. It's not the big epic cry sequences. It's the small little things, like when we talked about the rehab scene at the end, when she says, I'm not embarrassed. It's soul crushingly believable. So whatever happens to her as an actress from this point on, whatever accolades she's going to win, she will deserve them, in my opinion, because of those small movie moments that are just so believable. I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
Well, no, that's fine. And I think that's the extra hurdle for her to jump over, is that she's not only an actress, because she is an actress, but she's not only an actress, but she's a person who's lived a life for the last, I don't know, 10 years or 15, however long she's been famous. She's a person who's lived that life for that many years. And now she's having to break that down, and she's having to essentially forget who she's been for the last however many years, and be this vulnerable person again. Because at some point, I'm sure she was a vulnerable person, and a person who was excited, and this was all new, and she was going through it for the first time. Obviously it was a perfect casting choice. Their casting choice to put her in this role was a great casting choice. But the fact that she was able to flex her acting muscle to the point where she was able to go back to that point, while at the same time still being able to perform as, with the same level of professionalism as Lady Gaga does perform. So that to me was just absolutely amazing. And I'll bring that up later when we start talking about the end, but just seeing her development and seeing the character development throughout the film was, it's something that I especially after doing this podcast with you and trying to understand what actors go through, and being able to like on a Tuesday play pre-fame Allie, and then on a Thursday play post-fame Allie, like that just blows my mind. I couldn't imagine having to switch like that so quickly, but that's neither here nor there. But the fact that that's not her trade, that's not her everyday grind, what she does every day, like I thought that was it's crazy. It's crazy. And the fact that Bradley Cooper had was able to put enough faith in her, I guess from either talking to her or doing, I think they did some sort of interaction or some sort of reels or whatever, rehearsals type of a thing, before they could get the studios to sign off. But I'm glad they did it, and it was that's just, I don't know, it's just an amazing performance. So
let me interject something really quick. You know what her performance reminds me of? It reminds me of when you see a dance number at the end of a movie where all the actors are dancing in sequence, but one of the actors had to learn how to dance throughout the movie. They already know they can dance because they dance at the end of the movie. They already know they're capable of dancing, but to act like you're not able to dance, to learn how to dance, and then pull it off at the end is really difficult. I think that's what you're saying she did.
Yeah.
And I believe that that's true. What's interesting about what she said was that she is nothing like this character. When she was bound and determined to become known as a singer, she had no shyness to her. She was like, I'm here. I'm Lady Gaga. I'm going to be one of the biggest performers in the world. I have a voice. Here I go. Listen to me sing. She was not shy about it at all. So it was actually the polar opposite. So to actually be able to tap into that, knowing you were never that, is way more impressive to me. Because what you were basically saying was that she had to go back to how she used to be when she first tried the music industry, first tried to get into the music industry. But apparently she said she was nothing like that, that she was bound and determined no matter what. But she had to pretend, for lack of a better term, to go into an industry that she wanted to be in but was shy of, at the same time knowing she could do it, and then showing the audience that she was scared of it, yet she could do it. It's complex, and it's why the performance is getting all of the Oscar talk that it is.
And that reminds me of another movie that I saw last week, which was Mid-90s. I saw that advanced screening of it, and it, the main character in it is played by Sonny Suljic, and he's like pretty much like, he's an actor, but he's also pretty much like a pro skater, like a professional skater. But he had to play a kid who knew nothing about skating at the beginning of the movie and is like learning how to skate. So the fact that like it's one thing to play somebody who's like a professional skater if you're a professional skater, but playing like, singing poorly or, speaking poorly or skating poorly, that's got to be difficult, and you have to be a good enough actor to pull that off, to make it look like you're actually learning how to skate or actually learning how to deal with fame in this case, those types of things. I mean, that's difficult. And in mid 90s, he did a great job, and Lady Gaga did a great job in this one. We can start talking about like I guess alcoholism is a thing in is it in all of the A Star Is Born movies? Like, it's definitely a thing in this film, and also in the original film. What about the Chris Christopherson, Barbra Streisand one? Is it incorporated in there?
Yes, it was. And the 1954 version, and I have not seen the 1937 version, so I don't know.
It's definitely the case in the 1937 version too. That Norman main character is a huge drunk. So yeah.
Yes, it's substance issues have always been part of this story. But you were talking earlier about Bradley Cooper taking on this movie, and why would you want to redo another movie? And Hollywood has been accused of not doing original movies. But and you were saying that it can be done, that you can have an original take on an old idea. And I think that's what's happening here. I think that Bradley Cooper had such a fresh take on what he wanted to add to this story, to bring out the story, because there's character development in this movie that doesn't exist in the other films. It just doesn't. He has such a tremendous backstory in this movie, and I think that that's important, because a lot of people have said that this movie is actually about a star dying versus a star being born. But one is the same for me. A story of somebody who's been through all of this and can't take it anymore is as interesting as somebody who has never been in this before coming up in it. And I think what Bradley Cooper does is he puts his own stamp on it and puts him in rehab, puts him in understanding that it's a disease, which she mentions, that it's not his fault, that she's not embarrassed, which is a moment that I will never forget from seeing this movie. It just touched me in a way. I believed her so desperately that she was not embarrassed by the most embarrassing thing anybody has ever gone through in their life on a main stage in HGTV. It's just crazy, but I believed her. So yes, alcoholism has had a play in all of these films. For this one, though, for me, it seems like it became a character trait versus a character obstacle, because they talk about their father. Sam Elliott was like, he wasn't your friend, he wasn't your father, he was just your drinking buddy. And obviously his father was much older than Bradley Cooper, so God knows when Bradley Cooper started drinking when he was a kid, because his father wanted a drinking buddy. So it became a character in the film versus something you had to watch out for. In the Barbra Streisand version, you always knew it was looming, and he does crazy things because he's a drinker, but you didn't really feel an impact until after what happens to him. You don't feel that, and you don't really put the two together, that somebody, well, we know a lot more about depression and alcoholism and substance abuse now than we did in 1976. So to actually have somebody who has some form of social anxiety disorder, some form of anxiety in general, some form of depression, some form of self-medicating through drinking is a much more complex scenario nowadays, and Bradley Cooper puts all of that in. So yeah. I found that interesting. Sometimes when people have a drug addiction problem or an alcohol problem, it seems like a crutch that we're leaning on as a character versus it being part of the character. It's like having dark hair instead of blonde hair. It's not necessary for the character to have dark hair. It's not necessary for him to have that crutch. In this version of A Star Is Born, it is utterly necessary, because it's part of who he was as a human being, not because he became famous, not because he couldn't handle his depression. It is part of who he is as a human being.
Well, and you add into that his tinnitus too. I mean, you've got something that's threatening his ability to to create and share his art, and he's refusing. I mean, much like with his use of alcohol, he's and prescription pills, I guess. He's refusing to deal with this situation that is preventing him from sharing his art, because it's just another way of of patching up the hole as opposed to fixing the issue. He's just patching every single day. He's patching with alcohol. He's patching with pills, so that he doesn't have to deal with the fact that he's losing his hearing, and he doesn't even want to deal with the monitors. He gives an explanation to Sam Elliott's character, but it's an explanation it's short-sighted. I mean, I understand he says he feels like he's closed off if he's wearing in-ear monitors, but at the same time, like, he's looking at today as opposed to looking at, the rest of his life. And maybe he's okay with that. Maybe he's willing to make that trade, possibly due to his, how he grew up with his father, and his father, how his father lived his life, and all of that. But I don't know. I mean, that he definitely is a much more complex character, and you can even tell in the way that he forms his words that he's kind of losing his hearing. And also they from the word go, you can tell that he has hearing loss because of how he interacts with people, especially his first interaction with Lady Gaga backstage. He's asking her to repeat herself multiple times, and it's not that loud in there. It's just how he is, and I mean, I've got people in my family and in Steph's family who have, hearing loss, and there's a definite difference, socially, where they don't feel like they can interact as well, and they feel more closed off, and that's, I mean, I don't know, that scares me too. I mean, Alzheimer's and hearing loss and sight loss, all of, a bunch of people in my family and in Steph's family have gotten LASIK surgery, but it's like, there's no way I'm going to let somebody fire lasers in my eyes. Like, that's
craziness,
right?
There's
just too much of a risk. Like, I don't know. It freaks me out.
But here's the thing, Josh. You are living your life, and I've known you for 5 years now, so I don't know everything about you, but how you present your life, you are living your life as if you are not taking those things for granted. You love music deeply. You love movies deeply. You love the arts deeply, but you also have a technical side to you. You love your wife. You speak about your wife with true love in your voice. You are not taking those things for granted. So yes, it is a fear. I get it. I worry about hearing loss. I worry about sight. I worry about dementia. I have family issues going on right now with all of those things. But I do not go to bed at night worried about it because, one, you can't do anything about it to a degree, and two, if you wait to the moment you lose your hearing to go, oh my gosh, I should have gone to those concerts. I should have listened to that music. I should have done that YouTube video. I'm not living my life like that. I'm living my life fortunate that I can hear things like that, and I can feel things like that, and I can see things like that. And the one thing that I was going to say about when you brought up that scene with Sam Elliott and Bradley Cooper, you're right, he's living for the moment. Here's what happens in the film that makes it interesting that he put in tinnitus into the character description. Because he has been doing this for such a long time, all hurdles or all obstacles or all milestones have been met. He's in a huge rock country pop star. Everybody knows who he is. He can go anywhere at the drop of a hat. He can do anything he wants. It doesn't matter whether or not he's loaded or not. There is no goal anymore until he meets her. And then he realizes that I shouldn't be so short-sighted, because that's what Sam Elliott says to her that night that they go back to the hotel room after she performs with him. He says, he doesn't bring people up on stage. He has never brought a woman up on stage. I don't know what this is all about, but he has not performed like that in a long time. So whatever's going on, I have to, on some level, give it my blessing, because that is the Jackson Maine I know. That's the reason why this guy got into the game to begin with. So he's not necessarily short-sighted about his hearing. He just doesn't have to care anymore. He doesn't It's like winning $565 million in the lottery, which is a possibility for someone someday coming up. But once you get that, why you don't have to worry about your VEPCO bill. You don't have to worry about it. The goal, though, should be not to leave your windows open because you can afford the AC now. It's still to, be, grateful for what you've got. Don't open the refrigerator and just leave it open and let everything spoil because you can go to the supermarket and have somebody go buy you some more stuff because you have $565 million. You can't take those things for granted. And I don't think Bradley Cooper's character does that, but I also think you're right. He is short-sighted because he doesn't care at this point. There's no reason he can live on what he's made at this point. So he doesn't have to worry about those things until he meets her. Because he says, she says, and we talked about this earlier, I'm not getting on that thing, the motorcycle, if you've been drinking. And he, at one point in the film, comes up to her and she goes, you haven't been drinking, have you? And he goes, nope. And she goes, I can see it in your eyes. So he no longer is short-sighted because if he's drunk and embarrasses himself, she will no longer be in his life. Mm-hmm. So he has a goal. The sad part about it is that goal has to be self-driven in order to fight a disease like alcoholism. It can't be for somebody else. It can't be about somebody else. And she learns that lesson really hard, that it's not about her. That this, and Sam Elliott in that, oh my God, that great scene at the end where he says, this isn't you. Mm-hmm. This is not you. This is Jackson. This is what he does. This is what he inevitably would have done. And the irony to that is what he does at the end of the film is supposed to be so she can thrive as a human being and as a performer after he's gone.
Yes. He feels like that's the best thing to do for her, I think. But at the same time, like he's looking at it from a particular point of view and isn't realizing what, he's finding a way out, but that may not be the only way out. So that's the tough part with his decision at the end of the film. But the fact that he sees her coming up, and then I think the big scene. I mean, it seems like Sam Elliott is like the signpost in each of these scenes, because it's like who shows up when he's back when Jackson Maine is backstage at SNL watching her perform. Sam Elliott. So that whole thing, her album release. And all of that, that makes me wonder whether, what was the song that she sings, like, why you got to do that or something, about like why you got to wear those jeans or something, we got to.
Yeah, that's my least favorite song in the movie.
But I mean, like, that was my question, is does she really, like, did she write that song? Did Allie write that song? Did she want to sing that song? Or did she feel like that was the song that was necessary to get her on Saturday Night Live, for example? So, I mean, did she win the Grammy because she wrote, why you got to wear those jeans? Or did she win the Grammy because of her performance with him? Or, and how does the Jackson Maine character, how does Bradley Cooper's character, square that? Is he happy for her because she is creating her art? Obviously not, because of the scene in the bathtub. Like, I mean, he goes to the point where he is calling her ugly. And he doesn't believe that, but he's trying to, I think he's trying to do some sort of weird, I'm putting a mirror up to you. I want to show you what you're doing to yourself. He's trying to preemptively, help her to hit the brakes, but she's not having any of it, because it seems like she is genuinely happy with the way that her career is going. But that seems a little bit discongruous with the beginning, or incongruous with the beginning of the film, like at least from where she started, so, because she didn't seem like a person, like in the original one from 1937, like at the very beginning of the movie, like she just wants to be a movie star, period. Like the actress, or the woman, the main character, she just wants to be a movie star, period. Whereas it seems like Lady Gaga's character in this film wants to share her music. Like, she wants to be able to perform for people. But I don't know if she's evolving as a performer, and why you got to wear those jeans, why you got to have a butt like that is her evolution, and she's happy with it, or what? And they don't really, there's not really an answer to that, at least that I could glean. There's not really an answer to that until, I mean, especially since she goes back to, a performance, the performance that ends the movie, which seems a little bit opposite from why you got to have a butt like that, or whatever it's called.
Well, it kind of bothered me up until this moment right now as we're talking, and I now have a justification for it after what you were just saying. I think it's not a statement about her. It's not a statement about him. I think you find out how he feels about it, Bradley Cooper's character, and obviously she has that scene with the manager where she blatantly says, "Don't try to change me." And he goes, "What are you talking about? Don't change my talent," which I think is a very brave thing for somebody who's a new artist to say. One, saying yourself is talented is not something I'm ever capable of doing, because I'm not at a Lady Gaga status of talent. So if you have that kind of talent, I guess it's okay to say you have that kind of talent, but she's not saying she's talented. She's defending what she thinks is herself in a genuine mode. So I think the Saturday Night Live scene is actually a statement about show business in amongst itself, that this is what people this is what people want. And it's not that different than Lady Gaga's career, her actual career, because she comes out in meat dresses and 50 pounds of meat on her hair, on her dress. It was her dress. And sings, and that's a very kind of performance art, New York underground club thing to do, but yet she's singing a song called Paparazzi or Telephone or any of those pop ditties that she sings, all of which I like. It's not my kind of music, but I don't think to myself, "Ooh, this is disgusting." I think it's actually really good pop music. So it's sort of the same thing. She has a way of messing with the mainstream, being performance artist Lady Gaga in dress and in attitude and video and all that other stuff, because her videos are amazing. You should go and watch them. They're amazing. Alexander Skarsgård is in one of them, as a matter of fact. And the style and the sophistication of creativity there is amazing. So I think that Saturday Night Live performance is just a statement about where somebody can get lost if they allow the music industry or industry to take over who they are. And I think that at the end of the film, when she sings a song, yes, it's about her husband not being around anymore and how she had wished that she had one more moment. But it's also a statement about, this is who I am as an artist, and this is who I'm going to be as an artist for the rest of my career. So at first that was the only scene in the movie I was like, I don't really like that scene. I don't like the performance. I don't like the song. I don't like anything about what she's doing. But now it dawned on me that it's a statement about the industry, not about her. That this is what we are asking for from artists, not meat dresses and big platform shoes. We're not asking for that. The avant-garde is asking for that. The mainstream is not asking for that. And it begs the question, and I've always wondered about this, is it about what a person is putting out as a performer, or is it what we're willing to accept from a performer? So if Lady Gaga had come out and done Bjork type music, because Bjork is as visually interesting as Lady Gaga, but Bjork is, some people would call her pop music. I don't. It has a very performance art, avant-garde feel to it for me. If she had come out, then she would be Bjork, not Lady Gaga. And so I think it's a matter of what we want versus what people are able to give us based on what we want. If she was able to come out and do a Bjork song on Saturday Night Live, she would have done that, but that's not what the audience wanted at that time. So it's a statement about that for me. It's not necessarily a statement about her.
No, I guess, I don't know. I'm still trying to, figure that out, I guess, but I don't know. I mean, I guess what you're saying, just the like listening to the lyrics of that song is just kind of like, it sounds like it's something that was written to point out the absurdity of songs that are similar to that in real life.
Right.
But
Right. That's what I'm saying.
I hope that that's what it is. But I mean, that doesn't mean that's how people are going to listen to it, I guess. But whether you get it or not, I guess that's just up to whoever. But so speaking about the music, a lot of the music was written by Lady Gaga or by, I mean, there were a few of them that were written co-written by Bradley Cooper and Willie Nelson's son, Lucas Nelson, which I thought was really cool. And that's the backup group for Bradley. That is Bradley Cooper's band, or Jackson Maine's band. There were also a few songs that were co-written by Mark Ronson, who's kind of like, he's known for discovering Amy Winehouse and producing her first big album, and Lady Gaga and a couple other people. But I think across the board, I mean, I've been listening to the soundtrack for the last couple of days since Steph and I watched it. Steph was listening to the sound. In fact, we were like comparing what songs we had in our head all day today, and so she had The Shallows in her head, and I had the Black Eyes one in my head. So yeah.
Oh, I love that song.
Yeah, it's cool. It's like 2 minutes long, but like, it's just that intro there. But it was also interesting to hear how they shot. I listened to a podcast. It was it was the Hollywood Reporter has a new podcast called Behind the Screen, and they were interviewing the production sound mixer. So the guy on set, his name's Steve Morrow, and he was on set and he was recording what was happening. Specifically, they were talking about like the musical performances, because they were like, anytime, whether it was Lady Gaga or Bradley Cooper were singing into a microphone, that was the sound that they used in the film. And you can definitely tell, especially when he's playing guitar in the like after the drag bar concert, when she's getting ready and he kind of like gets pulled up on stage by one of the ladies and she asks him to play for him. And he, the fact that he's singing into a microphone in a PA system, like the sound design of that sounded right. Like it had a little bit of like a almost ready to feedback, a ringing to it. And it definitely sounded like it was on set performance, as opposed to, especially in like, I mean, Steph and I just rewatched West Side Story, and it's just like, it just kind of like switches, like the old West Side Story, between like, hey, we're talking and now we're singing, and it's like a totally different kind of like a feel. But so this one, I didn't get that at all. It didn't take me out of the film at all, going between like, talking and singing. But so this guy was talking about how they recorded a lot of the concert scenes, and they had like, I think it was like 8 minutes in like this, like right after Coachella, there's the Stagecoach is the festival after that, and it was right before Willie Nelson went on. They had like 8 minutes to record, and then at Glastonbury they had like 4 minutes or something crazy like that to get up on stage and perform. And the weird part was they were performing without playback, like,
I know, that's crazy, right?
So you just like see Bradley Cooper on stage with a Matthew Libatique with a camera, and those guys just doing something on stage, and you have no idea what's going on. You can't hear anything as the crowd. And then later on, they did crowd recordings and stuff, and Lady Gaga concerts and all that. And I think that's how they shot a lot of the Lady Gaga performances in the film, is they just had her play at one of her concerts. No big deal, But for the Bradley Cooper stuff, or the ones where it was him and her, like they're literally on stage for like 5 minutes. That's crazy. And they're able to get that. And it feels right. It feels real. It's visceral, and it feels like you are having a communication between him and the crowd. But I think it's all trickery, because it's all really close shots around him, steady cam, moving around. There's no establishing shots. There's none of that. And it's a good feeling, and it's different and new. But I mean, it's just it was really cool to hear the background between how they recorded that. They recorded 61 tracks for some of those performances. And then Norm is about 10 tracks of audio. So the fact that like they just dump all the audio on the sound mixers and the sound designers, like that's just crazy. But I thought it sounded great. I mean, you know, the concert scene sounded awesome. The La Vie en Rose performance sounded amazing. I mean, and I said all that because I did want to bring up the performance at the end. You know, obviously spoilers. So from way back on, but definitely from now on. So if you haven't seen the movie, go see the movie. And we're going to talk about spoilers from now on, definitely. So fair warning. After he kills himself, which is a really rough scene. I think that there's a couple things that I want to bring up about that scene. Number one is it's a single take, like it's a single shot, and we get to follow him in, and you never really see his face. I think that's important. And it's set up earlier in the film, talking about how he tried to kill himself on the ceiling fan with a belt. So the moment we see that belt, I mean, like he stretches it for a long time. Like it's almost too long how he stretches it. I think like him putting his hat down is it's a lot. And I mean, I was feeling it. Like you get that like thump in your chest, like that feeling. I mean, there's a handful of times where I've felt that. Like one of them was Foxcatcher, actually, like the end of Foxcatcher, and you know, when Steve Carell has the gun and oh my gosh, it's crazy. Oh, but there's you could just get that feeling, and it's just like my heart is like going like a mile a minute, and I felt that, and it started to kind of like subside a bit because I felt like I had that emotional reaction. So I wanted it to be done, I think maybe. And then the last shot where like that kind of like wide shot, establishing shot on the truck and the house and the garage, and just enough light to see through the little window in the garage that we don't need to see anymore. And we already knew what was happening, but just the fact that it seems like that scene seems so serene, and we don't understand, like just if you were to come up on that house, you wouldn't notice anything, but we've gone on this journey with this character, and we know what's happened, and we understand what's gone on, and we know what the repercussions are going to be, and what how that's going to hit Allie's character. So that was very well done, and that definitely had an emotional hit for me. And then the performance at the end was even crazier. Did you have anything to say about that particular scene, the suicide scene?
Well, actually, yeah, and then I can backtrack because I've got a couple things I want to say about the soundtrack really quick. So yes, it's interesting that you said the thing about the hat. That just put the feather in the cap for me. No, I don't know if that's a pun or not, but because I have learned over so many years, decades, of working with directors that there are signature moments, especially live on stage, where a director is trying to make a physical picture, a two-dimensional picture with three-dimensional art. And the way that you do that is having something as important as that hat, which goes from him to her to the side table at the end. It is a symbol of, I'm done. This is not only Jackson Maine is done, but I'm done. Okay. And I love the fact that that story is told earlier on in the film as kind of like a funny tale, but at the same time, it's also told as a reason why, you know, Bradley Cooper probably is so screwed up. I mean, you know, the part in the rehab center when he says, and that damn fan stayed on the ground for 6 weeks or so, that's just soul crushing because you're a young kid and there it is. And it probably took him a little while to put that together, what happened, and yet nobody cleaned it up. There's a lot of substance in how he put that in the narrative. So the thing that's soul crushing for me is, yes, I know what his fate is, and I'm glad he didn't change that. I'm glad they didn't live happily ever after. It would have been wrong on so many levels. Because it's about getting out of her way in his eyes. So it's important that he chooses the path that he chose. The thing that gets me is that establishing shot that you were talking about with the truck, the garage. it feels like a home because he says earlier on in the film, you know, thank you for making this a home. This used to be just a house. You've made it a home. So when you see that, it's like when you're driving by somebody's house in a neighborhood, you don't know who they are, but it just looks warm in there and they look like they're having a good life. You don't know. I mean, who knows what's going on in people's houses, but that's just the feeling you get. So when the camera does that establishing shot, it feels like that, but then you very quickly focus on what you need to focus on and how subtle it is that he is moving back and forth is subtle. And then, you know, some people might say it's heavy-handed, but I think that establishing shot is important because of all the reasons why I just said and all the reasons why you just said. And some people might think it's heavy-handed, but when the dog comes out and lays down in front of the garage, it's just devastatingly real because like animals have instincts. You guys are animal lovers. I like animals. I don't have any animals, but you know, I get it. I get why people love animals, but they have an instinct. And the fact that that dog comes out and just kind of like hangs out, knowing something's not right, and I'm interjecting that. There's no indication that the dog knows what's going on, but animals are smart, and I believe the dog does know, and that dog is so infinitely adorable that it's even that much more soul-crushing that that's what the dog is waiting for. The dog is waiting for nothing.
Yeah, well, and it's foreshadowed too, where she says that, you know, when he's in rehab and she says, you know, Charlie misses you, he just waits out by the front door and he lays like this, and she even like acts like what he's doing. So you're right, he's waiting for his master to come back. He's waiting for Jackson to come back, and Jackson's not going to come back.
It's just really smart storytelling. It just really is, because you remember those things as an audience member, and when they get brought back up, you knew it was important when she said it to begin with. Now you know why it's important. All right, so I want to backtrack really quick, and I'm not going to make a big deal of it because we could have a whole podcast on this soundtrack. I do want to make this point. First of all, there's should be no other people nominated for the Oscar for original song. There's 5 songs on the soundtrack that could fill this category easily.
Okay.
Easily. Okay. The last song that you were talking about, just I'll Never Love Again. That's beautiful. Maybe It's Time. The small little ditty that he sings in the drag bar is beautiful. And the way that he uses that as a way of showing how he plays this song all the time and the audience recognizes it. And then, of course, Shallow, which is going to win Best Original Song. And if it doesn't, I will not understand it. And here is why. Those songs are not only great songs, but I think it's Jimmy Fallon who brought this up when he was interviewing Bradley Cooper. It was either him or another talk show host said those songs sound like we've heard them a million times before, that they're in our subconscious, in the lexicon of our music listening experiences in the real world, yet we've never heard them at all, and they were as fresh as they were known in our souls when we first heard them in the movies. That right there is a high holy compliment that I agree with 100%. So not only that, they seem right for this type of performance, this type of artist, meaning Bradley Cooper's Jackson Maine. These seem right. They seem like that Southern rock, country pop thing that's going on. They seem right. Same with hers, with the exception of the Saturday Night Live song, which we've talked about already. That said, what's so important about these songs for me is that they're character driven. When he's singing Maybe It's Time, the song in the bar, he's talking about the old ways die. We need to let go of what has been and start the new, when he's getting ready to actually go out with a date with this new person that she just met. Black Eyes, the very first song, which is great. He talks about everybody's always waiting for you. Everybody's always like on your side. Everybody's right there next to you. Nobody is like leaving you alone. It's get away, get away, get away. It's a song about how that's where he's at as a performer and as an artist and as a human being. There's nobody who doesn't know this guy. There's nobody who doesn't understand his level of fame, meaning knows his level of fame, not understand it per se. So those songs are character driven. They are about what's going on. And he makes it a point to make it part of the movie. This could have gone so wrong, but it doesn't. Shallow, she wrote about him, and the song is about her at the same time. And it's almost painfully obvious that that's the way that it is. But then it turns into this I cannot get it out of my head song. And it no longer is about those two characters in a fictitious movie. It's about how my soul has been touched and how something in me needs to hear that music now. And like I said, I've heard it 3 or 4 times in a row one night to see if it had the same emotional resonance that I had when I first heard it. And it did every single time. And it became more about what I was pulling from the song versus what the song was meant to be for the movie. I don't know how they did that. Yes, Willie Nelson's son, which I don't remember his name right off the
Lucas.
bat. It's Lucas. He's very cool, by the way. I've seen a couple interviews with him. He's the one who's playing the guitar in the beginning that Bradley Cooper is supposedly playing. It's Bradley Cooper playing it at that point, but they dubbed in Lucas's playing afterwards for the soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how he pulled all of that off. I don't know how they wrote these songs that were so great as music. This soundtrack could be an album by itself and no one would question it. If you put this album out and didn't tell people it was Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper, sure, eventually they'd be able to recognize Lady Gaga's voice. His is unrecognizable. You can hear it's him, but he's singing in his Jackson Maine voice, which is crazy hard to do. It's crazy. It's hard enough to keep a consistent accent, period, let alone sing in it. And he sings as if he is that person, not as if he's singing a song. So that said, the music is so infinitely important. And I think that's why a lot of people can have a problem with the 1976 version. It's that the music is great, but it doesn't seem to be as character driven, although I could debate that back and forth. But so I just had to go back and touch on that because I'm amazed at how many of these songs, one after the next, after the next, after the next, there is nothing that pulls you out and says, oh, that movie or that song was written just for this movie and it's obvious. None of it. It seems like this is real music written for real people, presented as if we're watching a documentary about a concert more so than a movie about two characters who are fictitious. It's unheard of. And so my personal belief is that they keep predicting Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper to win Oscars. They keep saying the Oscar. Strangely enough, since the Golden Globes, the last 3, the 1954, the 1976, and now this one, have all won these actors Golden Globes, Best Actor and Actress in Musical Comedy. There's 2 different categories in the Golden Globes for actor and actress. And I think that's going to happen again. Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga will win Golden Globe. I think the interesting thing, and I'm not sure because I haven't heard a lot of people talking about it, they keep saying you're going to win the Oscar. And I believe that people think that she's going to win Best Actress. And I have absolutely no problem with it. None. Hard to say now because the category is wide open and we don't know who's what. But if she did win, I'm fine with it. If he does win, which I'm hoping he does win Best Actor, I hope this is his acting Oscar. Because I think there's only once in Oscar history that an actor directed himself and won the Oscar. And I think it's Laurence Olivier in Hamlet, which also won Best Picture. I'm not sure if there are other actors who have directed themselves to an acting Oscar. I hope this is Bradley's time because it's a performance worthy of an Oscar. But I think what's going to be the surprising thing to people is that Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper are going to be Oscar winners for Best Original Song. That's what I'm saying.
He didn't what song? Because he only co-wrote. They didn't co-write songs together. Oh, Alibi. They co-wrote Alibi together. They didn't write The Shallow together.
So Shallow's not written.
No, it's written by Mark Ronson, Lady Gaga, Anthony Rossimondo, and Andrew Wyatt.
Oh, that's so disappointing. I thought for sure because everywhere it's listed Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga, so I just assumed that meant that they wrote that. Okay, take all that back. Well, he should win anyway.
There you go. Well, and I think that musicals, in a lot of ways, musicals have an advantage because we're able to, it's difficult. Like for me at least, it's difficult to get me to like. Show like a lot of emotion in a film just like straight up drama, like to cry at a drama. That's really tough. But it seems like, whenever I like show any kind of emotion like that in a film, it's definitely tied to music. And in this case, we've got these characters performing that music, and especially that last song, the I'll Never Love Again. And they, he does a really good job of multiple times in the film. We've already talked about it, instances where, you have the foreshadowing of whether it's the hanging or whether it's the dog, how the dog's going to react. But in this one, him singing I'll Never Love Again for her. And the way that he edits that, the way that he cuts that off, and we don't really hear his performance of I'll Never Love Again. Initially you're kind of like, put a pin in that, and you're like, that's weird. That's interesting that they chose to do that. They chose to not show him performing that song for her. And then at the end, when she performs that song, we get to see their performance. Like, we get to see them perform together again, even though he's already gone. So I thought that was really cool. The other amazing part is that you've got Lady Gaga performing as this character Allie, who's just lost her husband and lover and soulmate, and she's having to perform. So the character's having to perform, but also Lady Gaga's having to perform as this character, and she's having to sing on camera to track. Like, she's having to sing this, make this performance, and she's having to emote in a very particular way. And she's doing that like with precision. Like, she's crying at a specific time, or she's like welling up at a specific time, and it is bolstered by the song, and it doesn't take away from the song. Because couldn't you imagine someone trying to perform at a memorial and not being able to do it? Like, I would have nothing against a person who's just lost, their husband, trying to sing a song that he wrote for her, about her, trying to go through that and not being able to do it. But she's able to do that, but then show the audience in the movie, and then also us as the film audience, that she's been affected by him and by his song, and by this song specifically, and just by her interaction with him for the time that she knew him. And it's pretty much impossible. So, I mean, I know I couldn't do it, but that doesn't really say much.
Well, you're right. It is a very interesting tightrope that she has to walk at that last scene, because one, not only is that like the scene, because in the two other versions before that, there's a big song, and it's epic, and it is soul crushing and mind blowing and emotionally wrenching. So when she starts to walk out, if you know anything about the history of this film, you're like, yeah, you got me up to this point. I'm done. You're done with my heartstrings. I cannot give you any more. And I give it to Bradley Cooper, because what he does is amazing in that. Okay, she's amazing, no doubt about it. She's amazing. Did she write that song? Now I'm disappointed in.
Yes, it's her, Natalie Hemby, Hillary Lindsay, and Aaron Ratery wrote that song.
Okay. So did Bradley Cooper. I'm saying that. I don't care. I'm so disappointed that they won't be able to be nominated together. That is just mind-blowing, because I'm sitting here trying to look it up in the sound department in IMDb, and you're right. He's not listed as a songwriter. That is so disappointing me. Unbelievable. Anyway, back to how great he does in this film. What he does in this last scene, did you notice that he stayed on her profile the most throughout the performance mostly?
Well, the performance is a single shot. It's one take.
Yeah. And when he goes to go closer to the front of her face, he stops and then comes back. And it dawned on me, the most beautiful thing about her is her profile. It's the most unwanted thing that she was dealing with. She didn't want to deal with her nose. She didn't want to deal with her profile. And it became a motif throughout the film. So for him to stay on it, and she does look just stunningly beautiful in that last shot. She just looks amazing. You can see that she has become who Lady Gaga is now. She has become that. And that this is, and we talked about this earlier, this is who she's going to be from this point on. No more of that You Like My Jeans song stuff. It's not going there ever again because she is now, she has evolved, and it's a forced evolve, but she has evolved as an artist, and she had to. And what's interesting about what you said about him showing her that song in the beginning is that you don't even realize through her performance until you're thinking about it later on that it was the same song. So
I mean, I knew you can recognize the music, but yeah.
Yeah, well, that's you.
Okay.
You're like more blessed than people. It wasn't until after I thought about it and then put the two together that it was the same song. And then I'm glad that I didn't realize it at the time because I was already a mess to begin with. And I already had my wall up. Like, I'm done. You cannot have any more of me. I am done. But it's soul crushing because he holds that camera on her profile and it just is beautiful. It's a statement about this is why the character decided to kill himself, because this right here is what I want people to see and remember Allie for, not me pissing my pants at the Grammys. I want them to see the beauty of her as a performer, and she has become beautiful to the mainstream because she is not traditionally what is considered beautiful according to the film. But what's so great about people who are not traditionally beautiful in our society is that after time, they become even more interesting and better looking in our mind's eye because they're not your traditional beauty. Traditional beauty in our society kind of fades in our eyes. Yes, she's beautiful, but she's always going to look like that. There's something about somebody who's not considered mainstream and beautiful that they become so much themselves that that's the beauty that we see. It's not a physical thing anymore. And how could we not recognize how beautiful this person's nose is, how beautiful this person's profile is, how ignorant it is of us to be judging somebody based on that when her beauty is all of that. And she just is mesmerizingly beautiful in that last shot. It's just one of those moments. It will be shown for decades to come of how you're supposed to do what you're supposed to do when you're telling a story in movies. It just will.
Well, and I think that the way that they cut like abruptly to him, you know, in time with the song, to him finishing the song, and then they cut back to her, and then you see like she looks right into the camera. That's the last shot of the movie. She looks right into the camera. And that's, I mean, that's it goes back to, in a lot of ways it goes back to the shot of her on the bar looking at him looking at him for the first time, seeing him for the first time. And I think that's like kind of a mirror of that, and you know, harkening back to that, and it's her looking at him. I think, I mean, it's her looking at the audience, I guess, too, but it's also her looking at him. It's also like the camera's up higher than her. And so, you know, you could say that's her looking at him in heaven or whatever you want to say, I guess, about that. But I think that it's a connection. It's a connection that she has with him. And the fact that she is able to, like I said, get through that song and perform it in the way that she does and still have that same kind of emotion. Like, I mean, it was bad. Like Steph was having a problem. She was fit to be tied. Like I said, there were multiple times when she was crying, but like she was just over there, just like wiping her face the whole time. And I know, you know, we weren't the only people that were crying, but it was definitely affecting. And in the movie, like you could tell that like nobody really got up.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing.
It was just like you just kind of sit there. I mean, most recently, I guess that happened with Avengers Infinity War, but I mean, it was a different kind of like, you know, it wasn't necessarily shock. It was just like, I'm going to let this sink in and feel this for a second before I run out to my car and go home. You know, and the other crazy part I was thinking about, like, as the credits were rolling, is like, we went to like a 3:00 showing on a Saturday, you know, on Saturday afternoon. And number one, it was packed. And number two, it's like, we're feeling like this emotion at like 4:45 on a Saturday. I don't know. It's amazing what film can do. Like you can literally like go from like being at the grocery store to like being transported into these people's lives and this and what they're feeling, and you actually feel connected, and that's crazy. It's crazy.
It is just wonderful. I am the fortunate son who have recognized that for so long, and I just live in those moments because, one, I can't not. It's impossible. I can't not live in that moment. Let me say something about that last shot really quick. See, for me, that last shot, sorry, just got me. That last shot is to somebody like me. Bradley Cooper is saying, we see you trying to be who you are. We see you. I don't necessarily believe that she was looking at him. Mm-hmm. And I love the fact that you paralleled it with that shot in the bar. So maybe that's what he intended. But for me, it was everybody out there who is afraid of their profile. We see you. You're not going unseen. What you're feeling right now is what we feel, and we know you're out there. And maybe that's my self-indulgence, and maybe that's my way of interjecting myself into such a beautiful thing. But we've talked about this before. We as an audience member are as important as anything else that happens in this process because we are the ones who are watching it. So we have to relish in that as audience members. And that moment at the end when you just sit through the credits, one, it's a moment of, am I going to look like I got stung by a bee because I was crying so hard? And, do I have any tissues left? It's that physically being a human moment, but it's also for me a moment where subconsciously the audience is saying thank you. We don't know how else to say anything. We don't know what you want from us as a filmmaker. We are just going to sit here in silence, but it's a thank you. Thank you for allowing us to go through that experience. Thank you for letting us have this, because it not only is it an amazing moment at 4:45 on a Saturday after going to the groceries and then having to go back out and do something else after the movie, it transports you, but it's also a communal experience too. And just like you said, she's not the only one in the audience. Steph is not the only one in the audience going through that emotional impact. So when everybody just kind of sits in silence after a movie, it's a thank you for giving us that experience. And we are feeling this as a community who just watched this movie. And that, to me, regardless of what Bradley Cooper takes from this, because he's going to be nominated for he's going to go from 4-time Academy Award nominee to 10-time Academy Award nominee all in one night. You realize that, right? Director, picture, because he produced the picture, screenplay, I'm saying song, performance, a couple of other things. I can't remember what they are, but he's going to go from a 4-time Academy Award nominee to a gazillion-time nominee all in one night. And we don't have anything. In the end, those kind of things don't really matter, because if he knows that that's how we reacted to this film, that's the satisfaction an artist takes from their work. The fact that Steph was having that emotional reaction, the fact that I interjected myself into his movie. He doesn't know me, but I'm convinced that's what she was saying to me at the end of that film. It is. I know it's what it was. And I was doing a play at the time, so I felt very fortunate that I got to do that later on that night or later on that weekend. I got to experience my level of that. And it's a minuscule, minor level, comparatively speaking, but that emotional state that Steph is going through is something that I have felt, not only as myself as an actor, but as an audience member coming back to me as an actor. And that, to me, is the accolade that Bradley Cooper should know that he deserves, that he touched deeply into people's souls, and he brought out things that, one, we don't want to face, all of the discussion that we've just had, but two, that it's okay that we have this experience. And so I hope that when he gets through the Oscar season and he has his shelf filled with accolades, I hope that he knows that that really is what he did. He gave us those moments. And for that, I say thank you, because this life is difficult, man. This life is hard. And you hear that over and over again. And if it wasn't for experiences like this film and the experience I had watching this film, I'm not so sure how much of this would be altogether worth it. I know that sounds dramatic, and no, there's no concerns, but it definitely balances the equation when you're going through something in life and then you go through this experience and you're touched by it. It balances the equation. You go, look at what I'm fortunate to feel. So for that, I say thank you, Bradley Cooper.
Yeah, amen. Well, you can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com, and you can go to facebook.com/actorandengineer, and please tweet us at actorengineer, and we'll tweet you back, and we'll have a nice discussion. You can also go on Apple Podcasts, and we're on Spotify Podcasts now, so you can catch us there. However you get your podcasts, but definitely if you want to give us a review, that would be awesome on iTunes. That helps us to get more listeners, and we can spread this out to a bunch more people. So, all right, we'll see you next time.